Hey guys, how's it going? Connor here today at Etrailer.com. We're going to be taking a look at the Airlift WirelessAir Compressor System here for our 2014 Jeep Grand Cherokee. It's going to be an excellent option here for our Jeep. Number one, it's wireless, therefore we don't have to run any air lines or lines into the cab of the vehicle. Everything is going to be controlled with our wireless remote here, or it's also Bluetooth compatible, so we can download a free app on our phone and adjust the bags with our phone as well. Essentially, it's going to allow us to fill our air springs at the touch of a button. We don't have to have access to an external air compressor. Therefore, if we're going to be hauling or towing heavy loads frequently, we're going to be able to adjust the air pressure inside our airbags for that particular load at any given time. So another thing I really like about this particular airlift compressor system is that it has both single path and dual path inflation. Now what this means is we can either inflate both airbags together, which is more than likely what you're going to be using most of the time, or we can inflate both air springs individually. So a nice thing about this controller here is, in this system in particular, we have 3 memory features. So what this allows us to do is, if we have a trailer that we tow frequently, we can go ahead and set it up, adjust our air pressure, then hit one of these buttons here to save that setting on our controller here. So whenever we get ready to tow that trailer, we just have to hit the 1, 2, or 3 button. We're automatically set up and ready to tow. So if we take a look up here, we see we have a very small compact size air compressor, which is going to be a perfect match for the air springs that we have on this vehicle. We also have a very small, easy, discrete ECU, which is very easy to mount and hide on the vehicle, which again just makes it another reason why this is a perfect option here for our Jeep. So a feature I really like about this particular compressor system is that we still maintain a manual inflation valve system. So these are actually teed in line with the airbags and the compressor. And what it allows us to do is, if we ever have an issue with our compressor or we lose power to it, we're still going to be able to inflate our airbags here with our manual inflation valves. And now that we've gone over some of the features and benefits, let's jump right in and show you how easy it is to install yourself. So the first step of our installation today, we need to find a place to mount our compressor and our ECU here. Keep in mind, you will have different space available depending on what trim package you have. We actually have the model equipped with the diesel engine, so we're going to be very limited on space. In places we have to mount the compressor and ECU, but we did find one suitable location for each of these components, and we're going to show you where. So for the ECU, we actually have it, we're going to mount it to the back pan of our spare tire here, behind the rear bumper, which you can see here. We have a piece of double-sided tape just holding it now so we can show you. So we're going to be drilling into this little pan here, which is actually going to be the cutout for the spare wheel and tire in the trunk of the vehicle. So that's where we're going to mount our ECU. And now we're going to mount our compressor on the left side here, in between our tank here and the exhaust. We want to be as far away from the exhaust as possible. We also need to be, I believe it's 16 inches from the ECU as well. So we're just going to generally mock this up just to show you where it's mounted. This gives us enough space from the exhaust. We shouldn't have too many issues. And the main thing here with these 2 locations is that we can come on the inside of the vehicle. We can access our mounting holes. If it wasn't for that, we'd have to use self-tapping screws, which is an option. I just prefer the nut and bolt method because it's a little bit more secure. I really don't have to worry about the vibrations from the compressor taking the self-tapping screws out. So now we need to come inside the vehicle here. We're going to go ahead and remove our spare tire here, as well as any of the other cargo trays, any gear we may have in the spare tire storage compartment. And once that's done, we can begin removing some of these panels. We only have a couple panels to remove, so this isn't a big job by any means. We've already done this, but I've sort of just mocked it back up into place just to show you the process. We're going to need a little flat blade screwdriver to peel the cap off these cargo hooks on either side. We have a 7mm bolt here holding that in, or rather a screw. So we have one on each side that we need to remove. Once that's out, we should just be able to pry this panel up. There's a couple clips on the bottom we'll show you. Here, 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 and here. They're metal clips, so they're not going to break nearly as easy as some of the plastic ones. So just make sure you pull up evenly on both sides. You shouldn't have any issues. And then we have 2 10mm nuts here holding this portion in. We don't actually need to remove it entirely. We just need to lift it up out of our way. So just like that, that's really all we need. We have a little prop rod to hold this up to show you our working area here. So now we're on the inside of the vehicle here. I just went ahead and peeled up this carpet here. You shouldn't have to remove any fasteners to do that. So if we remember, so right around in this little section here, that's going to be where our compressor is going to be mounted on the underside of that. And if we come over here to about the center, right on the back side of this panel here, on the other side is where our ECU is going to be mounted. So we're going to go ahead and drill 4 holes using our ECU as a template, and then we're going to use 1/4 inch hardware to secure it to the vehicle. You can see we were able to get 2 holes due to the space we have available. However, we couldn't get the top 2 holes. So what we're going to do is we're going to go on the inside of the vehicle. We're going to mount the ECU using those bottom 2 holes, and then we're going to drill out the top 2 using the ECU as a template. So before we go on the other side here and mount our ECU, I'm just going to go ahead and stick our hardware in now. Just using some 1/4 inch hex bolts, some 1/4 inch flat washers to match. Quick tip for you, when we go underneath and try to mount our ECU, chances are we're going to end up pushing some of these bolts through. So what we want to do is we're just going to take a piece of tape them to the body here, so we don't have to worry about pushing them through when we're trying to mount our ECU. So now we're going to go ahead and mount our ECU up on the vehicle using the holes and bolts that we just put through. It was really hard to see on the inside, but we did a lock washer and then just a standard hex nut. So now we can just go ahead and tighten these down. Keep in mind there is sort of a contour in the body panel here, so our bolts aren't going to sit completely flush. We don't want to tighten it down too much because we could damage the plastic on the mounting tabs for the ECU. So we just want to get everything snug until the lock washer collapses. So now that we've tightened down all the bolts to our ECU, just enough to flatten the lock washers, we're going to go ahead and mount our air compressor next. We're going to be using a little bit different method than we used for the ECU. We're actually going to be coming on the inside of the vehicle here. We're going to use our template up above because the panels are sort of overlapping, and the contour of the body here is going to create some difficulty trying to drill our holes underneath. We also have gravity working against us. So what we're going to do is we're going to sort of position our compressor sort of in this cutout here as best we can. It's not going to sit completely flush on the bottom, but we will be able to stabilize it with some washers, and we have enough hold on it that it shouldn't create an issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a punch tool just to mark our holes before we drill them. So we're going to drill our first hole here. Again, we're going to be using a 1/4 inch drill bit. So that first hole, we're going to alternate down to this one. So we went ahead and mocked up our compressor here. We put a couple bolts down through the top and the holes we already drilled. And now we need to drill our final 2 holes. I can't get a drill bit on there with the compressor in place. So similar to how we did at the top, I'm going to take our hole punch tool here. Make our mark on both sides. Then we'll take the compressor down and drill those holes. So now that we have our hole drills, we can go ahead and install our 1/4 inch hardware. We're actually only going to be using 3 of the 4 bolt holes with this compressor. However, that'll be plenty for this application. So now we can go ahead and set our compressor in place. You can orient it either way you'd like. However, we are going to have the output of the compressor face the front of the vehicle, because after some mock test fitting, we determined that we can just sort of fold the Airline and attach it to the port on our ECU here. As before, we are going to be using a split lock washer and a nut to follow things up. Now we can just go ahead and tighten down the rest of our bolts. We can go a little bit tighter with these compressor bolts here, just enough to collapse the lock washer is all we really need though. So now that we have our compressor and our ECU in place, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to connect the outlet of our compressor to the inlet of our ECU. We're going to look on the left-hand side of the ECU. We're going to see a single port there. We're going to need to run an Airline from that to the outlet on our air compressor. So what I found is, in order to keep away from this exhaust as much as possible, I should just be able to twist the hose over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a ring clamp and secure the connector to the body right here. To mount it like so, and then I'm just going to run our Airline tubing. There's probably about 5 or 6 inches between our two connection points right there. So we're going to unspool the Airline that came with our kit here. Just going to hold it up to see how much I think I'm going to need. Probably about right around here is fine. Then we're going to need to cut this Airline. Keep in mind, we're going to be using an Airline cutting tool throughout this video. I highly recommend you pick one of these up here at Etrailer, because this is going to be crucial to making straight cuts on our Airline to ensure we don't have leaks. So what I'm going to do is take one end of our Airline here. I'm going to stick it into the port on the ECU. What we want to do is we want to press down and then pull out. That's going to lock it in place in the connector. I'm going to just repeat the same thing for the other side of our Airline tubing here. Press down and pull out to lock it in place. So now I'm just taking a ring clamp, a self-tapping screw here. So here we have our air filter, and if we look right under the rear bumper here, there's actually already going to be a hole drilled in this little panel right here, this cross section. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to mount the air compressor or the air filter in that hole just like so. We're going to need to run a line and attach the barb fitting on the air filter first though. So we're just going to take our barbed fitting here, install it on the air filter. Hand tight is all we need for now. I'm going to take an end of our Airline tubing here, and then we're going to press it onto the end of the barb fitting. It may be a little difficult. You could try heating up the hose a little bit, but with a little bit of force and spinning it, we should get it to seat on there. We do want to cover most of these barbs though, I will say. So now that we have the hose fully seated on our barbed fitting here, I'm just going to mock it up into place to align it with our hole to see how much of our Airline we need to cut. Just going to cut out the Airline tubing, again using our tubing cutter tool. And now we can attach the other end on the compressor. Now we can maneuver our air filter up into place and just place it right through that hole right there. So if we take a look on the right hand side of our ECU here, there's going to be two more push to connect fittings, and those are going to be the ports that go straight to the airbags. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to route our Airline from the airbags to the two ports on the side of our ECU. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll show you the path we took. So here you can see we have our Airline coming out of the bottom of the spring cup there. We have it ran back here. We're actually going back and around, up and over the subframe here. We have a little tie point right here. So what we need to do is, since the spring cup is going to be moving from the A-arm as our suspension moves up and down, we need to make sure that we don't have too much tension on this line right here. If we do have too much tension and won't allow it to flex, it'll bend and possibly pop out of the airbag if we go over a bump. So what we need to do is we're just using a tie down right here, very loosely, making sure we give ourselves enough slack for the Airline to come down, for the suspension to travel. So that is a very important note. And then what we did is we just went ahead and routed the Airline up and over the subframe here. We zip tied it to some existing wiring harnesses. It's going to be really hard to see this, but essentially we just need to make sure we steer clear of the exhaust and any moving components. So again, we came up and over the subframe here. There's some wiring harnesses that we secured it to there, which I'm not sure if you'll be able to see. Then again, we came over the subframe here, and we'll show you where it came out on the other side of the vehicle. As you can see here, here's the end of our Airline. Now before we go straight to the ECU, we need to install this T which came with the kit. Just slides on there like that, and we pull it to make sure it locks in place. So then the other side of this is going to go to the ECU, and this side is going to go to a Schrader valve mounted on the outside of the vehicle. Keep in mind the Schrader valve would have came equipped with your air springs. Now we've cut just a small piece of the Airline tubing here. One end we're going to insert it into the T. The other end is going to go into our ECU. Now it's going to be kind of hard to see, but there's going to be two valves on the right side of our ECU. The top one is going to be for the right side air spring, and the bottom one is going to be for the left side air spring. So again, push it in, then pull it out to lock it in place. So we have a couple of different options here to mount our manual inflation valves. We could drill a couple holes into the bottom of the fascia here, or you could get a no-drill bracket here from Etrailer.com. It's not going to look exactly like this because we went ahead and made a bend in here so we can mount our inflation valves facing downward. So you're more than welcome to get this bracket as well and do the same thing with the vise, which is just what we did. Just to mock it up here, it's going to clamp onto the back of the receiver tube, and then we're going to have our inflation valves pointing down just like that. So now that we have all our air lines ran, the last thing we have to do is go ahead and connect all the power wires to our ECU and compressor. So we want to take the pigtail here that's included with the kit, our wiring harness if you will. What we want to do is there's going to be two larger gauge of black and red wire, have about 2 feet that come straight from the pigtail here. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and strip some jacket off these, just about 1/4 inch or so. And then we want to come to the 2 wires that are coming from our compressor here. We see we have a ring terminal and a spade connector on those. We actually want to go ahead and just cut these off. Then once we cut these off, we can go ahead and strip some of the jacket off. Once the jacket's off, we're going to be taking the heat shrink butt connectors that are included with our kit, and we're going to go ahead and crimp that on to both of these wires and then attach them to our wiring harness. Just like that. Now we're going to take our pigtail here and plug it into our ECU. So now that we have the other end of our wiring harness plugged into the ECU here, what we did is we took a loop, we came back around, so the remaining of our harness is going to come out here by our compressor. And now we're going to route this wire all the way up to the engine bay. We're going to go ahead and do that, and we'll show you the path we took. We have it mounted along the side of the tank here. And then similar to how we did with the airlines, we went and routed it above the subframe, securing it to some existing wiring harnesses. And now we're going to transition to this sort of rocker panel here on the driver's side. We went over these tank straps here, came along here, there's another tank strap here. And then fortunately there's this large cover right here on the bottom side there. So we went ahead and removed a couple bolts just to take this down, and we zip tied our wiring harness to our existing brake lines, which are ran under this panel here. And it's going to come all the way through the panel, and we can see we have a little bit sticking out here. We have it zip tied to some remaining brake lines, and the rest of our bundle is going to be right here. So now we're going to go up top. We are going to find a spot in the engine bay to route our pull wire down, see where we can fish it out at. Now we're going to carefully take our pull wire and try to fish our wiring harness up through the engine bay here. We pulled the rest of our wiring harness up here, right beside the air intake. And we actually need to run this over to the passenger side of the vehicle because that's where the battery is. So what we did is we went ahead and wrapped our wire up. As you can see here, we used some wire loom for a nice and clean look. We went ahead and removed this heat shield right here, and we tucked our wiring harness behind this heat shield here so we can avoid the turbo and downpipe. Keep in mind, if you don't have a diesel model, yours is definitely going to look a little bit different here. But the same principle will still apply. So we have our wiring harness, you see here. Again, with our nice wire loom, ran over to this side. We tucked it behind this panel here. We had to extend our wiring harness a little bit because it actually stopped right here. So we just took some butt connectors and some additional 10 gauge wire. We used white for ground and black for power. If you recall, there was also a pink wire that was included with this wiring harness. This is an optional for installation. You don't have to install that. It essentially will determine how the compressor functions. So if you were to use the pink wire, you would attach it to a keyed ignition source. In other words, a circuit that turns on when the ignition turns on. And essentially how that works is if you were to splice into that pink wire to an ignition source, the compressor would turn on as soon as we turn on the vehicle. However, if we instead just attach our power and ground wires to the battery, the compressor is going to turn on when we wake the remote up or we wake the mobile app up in our phone. So now we have our black and white wires routed near the fuse box here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open the fuse box. We're going to attach our power wire to that terminal right there. So what we need to do is we need to take a 13mm socket and remove this nut. Now we can take our red fuse holder, which comes in the kit, go ahead and just cut that wire there in half. going to attach that to the black wire. Now we can take our other end here, strip some of our wire back, and attach our ring terminal. So we have that crimp on there. Can go ahead and attach that to the positive post on our fuse box. And then tighten that 13mm nut back down. Just like that. You can see we had our final wire here, which is our white wire. We went ahead and grounded it to this bolt here, which we removed using a 13mm socket. So now the final step here is going to be to go ahead and insert our fuse into our fuse block. Or our fuse holder rather. And there you can hear right away our compressor kicking on, so we know everything's working. So the next thing we need to do is we need to take our remote here, go ahead and insert the battery, and then we need to pair the remote to our ECU. In order to do that, we need to turn on our remote first, and then it'll come up that it's searching for a device. While it's doing that, we need to go back to the hood of the vehicle and take out the fuse holder, insert it again a couple times, and that's how you'll pair the remote to the ECU. It'll come up on the screen that the pairing is successful when you've completed that step. So this is the screen that's going to appear on the remote once you pair it successfully to the ECU. So now we need to check all our fittings for leaks. So in order to do that, we're going to press this arrow here. We're going to increase the pressure to 20 psi. And then we're going to hit the center button here. So we should hear our airbags, our compressor kick on, our airbags fill. Once it reaches 20 psi, we're going to take a soapy water solution and we're going to spray down all our connection points. What we want to do is we want to take our soapy water solution here. We want to spray down all our T fittings as well as our ECU on the ports where the airbag fittings go in, as well as the port where the compressor goes into the ECU. What we're doing is we're looking for bubbles. If we see any bubbles coming from any of these fittings, that means we have a leak. And what we need to do is we need to remove the airline and recut the line. Usually that fixes the problem. So it doesn't look like we have any leaks, so that means we're good to go. That's going to do it today for the look at the Airlift WirelessAir Compressor System here for our 2014 Jeep Grand Cherokee.